Heidi ho guys, welcome back. Video number 3 here. Today we are going to talk about solving systems of equations through a new process called elimination. Okay? So we're going to talk about elimination today. How do we eliminate variables in order to solve an equation? Alright, up to this point we have learned how to solve a system of equations. Again, that's more than one or two equations that contain two variables, x and y. We looked at two methods already. Talked about how to solve them through graphing both lines and determining where that point of intersection was, and then also through the use of substitution. Okay? Substitution, obviously solving for one variable, plug it into the other, and then getting ourselves an equation with only one variable, and then solving and substituting from there. Okay, substitution I feel is probably the more difficult of the three. Today we're going to talk about another method, which is really the last method we'll talk about in order to solve systems of equation, which is through elimination. Okay, so you have to think, elimination, what does that mean? Elimination, you are going to get things to cancel out. Okay, get things to completely drop out of the system. So our goal for today's lesson is solving through elimination. We are going to try and get with our system of equations either the variable of x or the variable of y to completely cancel out of the equation. Okay, so quickly let's go through the steps. How do you actually solve these systems of equations by elimination? So the first thing, you're going to have two equations with x and y. What you're going to do is basically you're going to try and eliminate x or y. So to do that, you're going to try and first get the two equations so that they line up, so they match. Okay? So you have the x's lined up with the x's, the y's lined up with the y's. Okay, now, in order to cancel out a variable, and this is kind of the biggest thing, step number 2 is the most important part. Okay? In order for two things to cancel, they must be opposites. Now, what does opposite mean? Okay, opposite, you can think numbers-wise. If we have 2, the opposite of 2 would be negative 2, such that if I were to add 2 and negative 2, I would get 0. And 0 would mean that I would get that thing to cancel out. I would get 2 to cancel out. Okay? So we are going to try and see if we can get one of the variables to cancel out by making them opposites. So we're going to first determine are two of the coefficients already opposites that we can easily eliminate it, or do we have to do some sort of manipulation to get one of variables to be opposites? Then what we're going to do is we're going to add, step 3, add one equation to the other. So we're going to add two equations, and what's going to happen is one of the variables is going to cancel out, and you're going to get a single equation, one equation with one variable, which will be easy to solve. Then you'll solve for that variable, figure out what it is, and plug it back into one of your original equations to solve for the last variable. And again, when we get our solution, we're going to get a solution for x and y. We are going to write our solution again as a point, just like we did with graphing and with substitution. Okay? Now, today's going to be, should be a little easier, I think, than substitution. It's going to be a grind, so I want you to remember, okay? In terms of life and in math, when you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And up top, you got my man Ric Flair here, the nature boy, going to tell you what it's all about.
You're talking to the Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, kid stealing, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun, and I'm having a hard time holding these alligators down.
Woo! That gets you excited, folks. That gets me a little excited to do some elimination. So let's jump right into it and get started. Okay, so to show you the steps, let's go through an example. So first thing, I look at my two equations. 3x minus 4y equals 10. 5x plus 4y equals 6. First thing that we ask ourselves, are the variables in both equations lined up? Notice here I have 3x stacked over 5x, negative 4y over 4y, 10 over 6. So I have like terms stacked together, so we're all set to go. Next step, what we're going to do to eliminate, we need to have opposites. So notice here I have negative 4 and positive 4y. So I have the same variable, but the numbers negative 4 and 4, these are opposites, such that when I add them, I get 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two equations and add them together. If you add opposites, they'll cancel out. That's going to give me 3x plus 5x will give me 8x. Negative 4y plus 4y, well, that's going to drop out. That's 0. And there's no sense in writing 0 there, so that's it. And then what I'm left with is 10 plus 6 equals 16. So I have 8x equals 16. Okay? That then allows me to divide by 8 from that side, divide it over here, and what I now know is that x equals 2. Okay, so I've now solved for one of the variables just by eliminating. Simple as that. Now, how do I solve for y? Well, I'm going to take this variable of x and I'm going to plug it in to either the first equation or the second equation. Doesn't matter which one, plug it into one of the originals. So here I have 3 times, instead of x, I'm going to put 2 minus 4y equals 10. So I'm taking my value of x, which is 2, and plugging it into the first equation for x, substituting it in. And now I can solve. All right, so going ahead and solve, I have 3 times 2, that is 6, minus 4y equals 10. Then I'm going to subtract 6. Before I divide by negative 4, subtract 6 first. That's going to give me negative 4y equals 10 minus 6 is 4. Then I can divide by negative 4 to get y by itself, and I have y equals negative 1. So now I have solved. I have a value of x and a value of y. Now the last thing I need to do is write my point. Remember, x comes first, so I have 2. Y is second, negative 1. Therefore, my solution is 2, negative 1. Again, if you don't believe me, you can check by plugging in your value of 2 and your value of negative 1 into both equations, and you'll see that it works. After getting done with this problem now, here's what you should stand up and do. That's right, baby, flashing the belt, okay? When you get done with one of these problems, you should be so jacked up like Ric Flair that all you do is stand up and jack the belt, or represent the belt and give me a woo, okay, like Mr. Ric Flair. All right, so let's go ahead and do some more examples, all right? So I'm going to go through probably 2 of them, let you guys try numbers 4 and 5, all right? So let's start with number 2. So number 2, what I have is 2x minus y equals 12. And negative 2x minus 3y equals negative 12. First thing to notice, I have the x stacked over x's, y stacked over y's, numbers over numbers. Set to go. Biggest thing here, do we have opposites? Meaning, do I have the same number but opposite signs? Right away I notice 2x and minus 2x. So I'm all set to go. So to solve, I'm going to take and add the 2 equations together. Okay, that's going to eliminate the x. 2 minus 2, or 2 plus negative 2, that's 0. Don't need to write that. Okay, careful in the next step. Negative y plus negative 3. Adding negative plus a negative is going to give you more negative, so negative 4y. And then careful here, I have 12 plus negative 12. Well, what happens there? 12 plus negative 12, that eliminates 2. That's okay. We can write that as a 0. 12 plus negative 12 is 0. Now solving for y, don't get confused here. Just because, yes, it's negative 4y, that's all right. We can still divide by negative 4. Remember, 0 divided by anything is going to be 0. So that tells me y is 0. Remember, this is part of a point. We can have y be 0. That's okay. Now, to solve for x, we're going to take y is 0 and plug it into one of the equations. Doesn't matter which one I plug it into. I could plug it into the first or the second. Here's what I'm going to do. I see the first equation, I just have y. This is going to be a little easier for me. So I'm going to plug in 0 for y. So my second equation, or sorry, my first equation, 2x minus y equals 12. I'm going to take 0 and plug it in for y, so 2x minus 0 equals 12. That basically drops out, that's nothing, so 2x equals 12. Divide by 2, and you get x equals 6. Okay, now I have solved that, so I'm all set. Now I need to write my solution as a point. So I have x is 6, y is 0. Even though I solved for y first, that's okay. When I write my point, remember it's always x comma y, so it's 6 comma 0. And that is done. Okay, next example, let's take a look at number 3. Okay, number 3, a little different here. Now I look at this, okay, I have, sure, x stacked over x, y stacked over y, number over number, that's all set. Second thing, biggest thing, step 2, are they opposites? Do I have any of the coefficients that are opposites? Well, I have 1 and negative 6. Those are not opposites, right? I would need 6 and negative 6. I have 2 and 2. Those are the same number, but not the same sign. And then I have 4 and 10. Obviously, we're not going to deal with those. Now, notice I'm going to look at the y's. I have 2y and 2y, but they're not opposites. They need to be different signs. If I were to start and add these together, I would get 4y, not eliminate them. So how do I get them to be opposites? Well, remember, if I want, let's say I want one of these y's to be negative. Well, how can I do that? Well, I can't just change the sign. I can't just make this a negative. I can't just change that to negative 2y because that changes the entire equation. But what I can do is I can change the sign of the entire equation. So I can multiply everything by negative 1. So I can take x times negative 1, this times negative 1, and 4 times negative 1. And what is that going to give me? Well, it gives me minus x minus 2y equals negative 4. So I multiplied the top equation by a number, by negative 1. So I got my y's to be opposites. That's kind of the tricky part here. If they're not opposites, we can make some changes to make them opposites. So all I did was multiply. And now I can go ahead and add these two things together. So negative 6x minus x, that's minus 7x. Okay? 2y plus negative 2y. That cancels out. Got the y's to cancel. Equals negative 10 plus negative 4, that's negative 14. Okay, that's good. Now I have x by itself. Negative 7x equals negative 14. I can divide by negative 7, cancel it out. Divide by negative 7. I have x equals 2. Negative divided by negative gives you a positive. So notice here I changed my y. I multiplied the entire equation, not just this, the entire equation by negative 1. Now I have x equals 2. Then we follow the same steps. Plug this into one of your original equations. So it doesn't matter where. You can plug it in there or you can plug it in there. I look to find the easiest one. I see just x. So I'm going to plug it into the first equation because I got x by itself. So I have 2 plus 2y equals 4. Again, I'm using the first equation of x plus 2y equals 4. I'm using the original equation. Then I can solve. So I look here, I'm going to subtract 2 first, cancels out. I'm going to get 2y equals 2, divide by 2, and I get y equals 1. And then I express my final answer as a point. I have x2, y1, so that's going to be a point of 2, 1. That is my solution. So key thing in this problem is I had to modify one of the equations, change everything, multiply everything by negative 1 to get it to match up. All right, now I want you guys to pause and reflect and work on numbers 4 and 5. Notice the numbers 4 and 5. Okay? Number 4, I'll give you a hint. We don't have opposites. We don't have the same number nor different signs, but I want you to think, can you multiply one of the equations by some number to get things to cancel out? Same idea with number 5. All right, I want you to pause the video right here. I'm going to quickly go through numbers 4 and 5, and I want you to check your work. Ready, set, go. All right, good grief. Hopefully these number 4 and 5 were a little challenging. Okay, threw a little curveball at you, but hopefully you pushed on through. If not, let me quickly explain what I did. Number 4, looking at this one, I see I don't have, like I said, any of the variables that they're matched up, but no, they're not opposites. So here's what I did. I took the second equation. I see a 4 and a 2. So what I decided, hey, I can multiply 2 to get into 4. So I multiplied by not only 2, but I also saw that I needed negatives. I needed opposites. So I multiplied by negative 2. I didn't just multiply the x, but the entire thing. That got me then negative 4x plus 4y equals 0. I brought the first equation down, added them together to get the x's to cancel, and the y ends up being y equals 8. I then took y equals 8, and I took my first equation, 4x minus 3y equals 8, this one up here, plugged in 8 for y, and solved for x. So I got then solving for x all the way over here, x equals 8. Plugging in as a point then, x is 8, y is 8, so I got 8, 8 as my solution. All right, let me move to number 5. Number 5 is a little sassy, okay? This one's hard, okay? This one was challenging, so if you didn't get this one right away, that's okay. I look here. I get 2y, 13y, 39 and negative 9. 9 and 6. I got nothing here, no opposites at all. But I see x's are stacked on x, y's and y. So I got to get them to be opposites in this one. So I see, okay, 2 and 13. 2 does not go into 13. 9 and 6. 9 and 6, they don't go into each other. But what I did is I thought of, okay, what's the least common multiple between some of these numbers? So I took 9 and 6, and I know 9 times 2 is 18. 3 times 6 is 18. So I used a common multiple of 18. And what I did then is I multiplied the entire top equation by 2 and the bottom equation by negative 3. So, and again, it multiplied the entire thing. So I got the two equations here, 18x plus 4y equals 78, and negative 18, because I multiplied by negative 3, minus 39y equals 27. Positive 27 because you have two negatives. Okay? Then I canceled out the x and solved. I got negative 35y equals 105. Divide by negative 35y equals negative 3. Good, I find one of them. Now once I found one, the rest should be easy. You take one of your original equations. Notice I took the original equation, not after I adjusted it, but the original. So 9x plus 2y equals 39. I plugged in negative 3 for y. Solve for x, got x equals 5. Writing as a point, I got 5, negative 3. Okay? After you get done with this one, this is when you stand up and flash the belt and act like you're Ric Flair. Kiss stealing, wheeling, dealing, limousine riding, jet flying. Woo! Okay? Wearing alligator skin boots and shoes. Looking good like a boss. Okay? So what we did is practice this through elimination, our last method of solving systems of equations. All right, we'll see you in class. Hope you enjoyed.